Commander Zixthala of the Galactic Defense Initiative stared at her tactical display in utter disbelief. The human vessel approaching Station Nexus 7 looked decent enough. Sleek lines, proper energy signatures, clearly advanced technology. But the crew preparing to board? They looked like refugees from a medieval museum. "Tactical Officer Krevin, please tell me our sensors are malfunctioning," she commanded, her four eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sure sign of stress among her species. "Sensors are functioning perfectly, Commander," Krevin replied, his own voice tight with confusion. "The humans are indeed wearing what appears to be primitive metal armor." Zixthala magnified the display, hoping distance had somehow distorted the image. It hadn't. 5 humans stood in their airlock, each wearing crude plates of what looked like basic steel or iron. The armor was thick, bulky, and held together with leather straps and metal buckles that belonged in a history textbook. After 3 centuries of military service across dozens of species, she had never seen anything so archaic used as actual protective gear. Every civilized species in the galaxy used lightweight polymer weaves embedded with energy-dispersing nanomaterials. The technology was centuries old, standard issue even for planetary militias. These humans looked like they had raided an ancient battlefield. The lead human, a tall woman with close-cropped brown hair, removed her helmet, a simple metal dome with eye slits that wouldn't have looked out of place in a primitive warfare exhibit. Despite her absurd appearance, she moved with unmistakable military bearing and spoke into her communicator with crisp authority. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. We're here for the scheduled diplomatic summit." Zixthala felt her tactical instincts warring with diplomatic protocol. The humans had arrived precisely on time, their credentials were perfect, and their ship's technology was clearly advanced. Yet they wore armor that predated galactic civilization by millennia. "Captain Rodriguez," she finally responded, "welcome to Station Nexus 7. Proceed to Docking Bay 12. We've prepared appropriate quarters for your delegation." As the humans clanked through the airlock like walking scrapyards, Zixthala made 2 mental notes. First, recommend extreme caution in all military assessments involving humans. Second, investigate whether this species had somehow achieved faster-than-light travel through sheer stubbornness rather than actual intelligence. The metallic footsteps echoing through her station's corridors suggested the answer might be more complicated than either option. 3 days into the diplomatic summit, the elephant in the room had grown too large to ignore. Ambassador Threndock of the Hegemony Council, his tentacles writhing with barely contained scientific curiosity, finally decided to address what every delegate was thinking, but none dared voice directly. "Captain Rodriguez," he began, choosing his words carefully, "we've had time to review your species' technological achievements. Your faster-than-light drives are remarkably sophisticated, your weapon systems show impressive innovation, and your starship designs demonstrate clear engineering expertise." He paused, his translator working overtime to convey diplomatic delicacy. "Yet your personal protective equipment appears to be, how shall I phrase this, reminiscent of pre-spaceflight civilizations." The main conference hall fell into an uncomfortable silence. Even the ambient hum of the station's life support systems seemed to quiet in anticipation. Dozens of alien delegates leaned forward slightly, their various appendages, sensory organs, and communication devices focused entirely on the human captain. Elena Rodriguez smiled, an expression that, despite 3 days of interaction, still managed to make several species uncomfortable for reasons they couldn't articulate. There was something unsettling about the way humans displayed their teeth when pleased. "Would you like a practical demonstration, Ambassador?" she asked, her voice carrying a tone that suggested she had been waiting for exactly this question. The silence deepened. Translator devices seemed to pause their constant whirring, as if even the machines were holding their breath. "Please," Threndock replied, his scientific mind overriding his diplomatic training. "We would be most illuminated." Rodriguez gestured toward her security detail with casual authority. "Sergeant Martinez, if you would assist us." A stocky human stepped forward, his armor even more primitive-looking than the others. The metal plates showed clear signs of hand forging, hammer marks, slightly uneven edges, and repair welds that spoke of battlefield maintenance rather than factory precision. He looked like a museum exhibit that had somehow learned to walk. "Standard demonstration protocol, Captain?" Martinez asked, his voice completely calm, despite standing before representatives of 12 different galactic civilizations. "Standard protocol, Sergeant," Rodriguez confirmed. What happened next would fundamentally alter military doctrine across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Dr. Kelrith's scientific integrity demanded immediate answers. The Vorthak xenobiologist had spent the better part of 2 days running increasingly frantic experiments in her laboratory, convinced her instruments were malfunctioning. They weren't. The readings were consistent, repeatable, and absolutely impossible according to everything she understood about material science. "This makes no logical sense whatsoever," Kelrith muttered, initiating her 9th comprehensive scan of the human armor sample. Her triocular vision focused intently on the molecular analysis display. "Captain Rodriguez, according to every scanner I possess, this material is simple iron with approximately 0.8% carbon content, basic steel. My computational models indicate this should provide minimal protection against modern energy weapons." Elena Rodriguez sat with remarkable patience in the laboratory's observation chair, watching the increasingly agitated scientist work. The Vorthak's 3 eyes were blinking in different patterns, a clear sign of scientific distress among her species. "Dr. Kelrith," Rodriguez said quietly, "what do your instruments tell you about kinetic impact resistance?" "Kinetic impacts?" Kelrith's translator conveyed her genuine confusion, complete with harmonic undertones that suggested the concept was somehow archaic. "Captain, kinetic projectile weapons became obsolete over 2 millennia ago. No civilized military force has employed solid ammunition since the development of reliable plasma generation technology." Rodriguez leaned forward slightly. "Humor me, Doctor. Run the analysis." Kelrith's appendages moved reluctantly across her control interface. "Well, if I must, the metallurgical structure does show excellent resistance to physical deformation. The thickness, grain alignment, and carbon distribution would distribute kinetic energy quite effectively across the surface area." She paused, her scientific mind beginning to work through implications she didn't want to acknowledge. "But Captain, this is completely irrelevant in contemporary warfare. No military force would waste resources on solid projectiles when energy weapons can easily penetrate any reasonable thickness of—" She stopped mid-sentence, her 3 eyes widening in sudden, horrible understanding. "Captain Rodriguez," she said slowly, "are you suggesting that humans developed their protective systems specifically to counter kinetic weapons that the rest of the galaxy abandoned centuries ago?" "Not specifically, Doctor," Rodriguez replied with that unsettling human smile. "We developed it to counter everything." Word of the human armor demonstration had spread through Station Nexus 7 like wildfire through a dry forest. Within 6 hours, military attachés from every major galactic civilization were demanding their own verification tests. Commander Zykthala found herself reluctantly hosting what could only be described as a scientific circus in her station's primary hangar bay. "This is highly irregular and completely unprecedented," grumbled General Voss of the Chronari Empire, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with agitation. His species' personal armor was a genuine masterwork of military engineering, ultra-lightweight ceramic composite plates that could deflect plasma bursts, pulse laser arrays, and particle beam weapons with remarkable efficiency. "I've commanded armies across 17 star systems and never encountered such a primitively simplistic approach to personal protection." Sergeant Martinez stood calmly in the hangar center, still wearing his battered steel plate armor. The contrast was stark. Sleek alien technology surrounding one human who looked like he'd stepped out of a historical warfare documentary. Yet his demeanor was completely relaxed, almost bored, as various species meticulously arranged their most advanced weapon systems. "Begin the assessment with standard plasma rifle configurations," Commander Zykthala announced to the assembled military observers. The first coordinated volley erupted from 3 different positions simultaneously. Plasma bolts it routinely vaporized armored combat vehicles, struck Martinez's crude steel plates, and simply dissipated. The metal glowed briefly with absorbed energy, then returned to its normal dull gray finish. "Pulse laser arrays," Zykthala commanded, her voice tight with disbelief. Concentrated light beams capable of cutting through starship hulls left nothing more than superficial scorch marks on the human's armor. The energy seemed to spread across the metal surface like water across stone. Particle accelerator weapons. Even the hegemony's most sophisticated military technology, streams of accelerated subatomic particles, appeared to have minimal effect. The armor absorbed the devastating energy, distributed it through some mechanism the observers couldn't understand, and simply endured. General Voss broke the stunned silence first. "This defies every principle of material science. Those weapons should have reduced him to component atoms." Dr. Kelrith stepped forward, scientific excitement overriding diplomatic protocol. "General, perhaps we should attempt kinetic projectile testing?" "Kinetic weapons?" Voss's laughter sounded like grinding metal. "Doctor, my civilization abandoned kinetic weapons 3 millennia ago." "I have some," Martinez said quietly. The hangar fell completely silent. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council convened within 6 hours of the weapons demonstration. Representatives from 12 major civilizations gathered via quantum-entangled communication networks, their holographic forms displaying various degrees of concern, confusion, and barely concealed alarm. The implications of what they had witnessed threatened to overturn centuries of established military doctrine. Captain Rodriguez sat with characteristic composure at the center of the assembly chamber, still wearing her primitive steel armor, seemingly oblivious to the fact that her species had just fundamentally challenged everything the galaxy understood about warfare and technological development. "Captain," began Fleet Admiral Korath of the Draconis hegemony, his scaled features tight with concern, "we require comprehensive understanding of your species' military evolution. How precisely did humanity arrive at this extraordinarily unconventional approach to combat technology?" Rodriguez activated a holographic display projector, its human-designed interface noticeably bulkier than galactic standard equipment. "The explanation is remarkably straightforward, Admiral. Unlike your civilizations, humans never achieved internal peace. We never stopped fighting each other." The display materialized a comprehensive timeline of human history, millennia upon millennia of continuous warfare, technological innovation driven relentlessly by the perpetual need to kill other humans more effectively, while simultaneously protecting themselves from identical innovations developed by their enemies. "While your species evolved beyond the necessity of internal conflict," Rodriguez continued, highlighting specific technological developments, "humans have existed in a state of constant military competition for our entire recorded history. Every advancement in offensive weaponry was immediately countered by corresponding advances in defensive technology." She indicated various crucial points along the timeline. "When we developed superior projectile weapons, we created thicker, more resilient armor. When we invented directed energy weapons, we learned to manufacture armor capable of handling both kinetic and energy-based attacks simultaneously. When we created nuclear weapons, we developed powered armor systems that could function effectively in radioactive environments." "Surely," interrupted Counselor Vexhai, her crystalline form resonating with confusion, "this constant internal warfare significantly hindered your technological advancement." "Actually, it dramatically accelerated our development," Rodriguez replied. "Every human nation, every military organization, every conflict drove rapid innovation. We never had the luxury of assuming our enemies would fight honorably or employ predictable weapon systems. Admiral Korath leaned forward intently. Captain, are you stating that your entire species' military technology assumes enemies will employ every conceivable weapon type simultaneously? Not assumes, Admiral, expects, based on extensive historical experience. Dr. Kelrith's private research laboratory had transformed into the most strategically important facility on Station Nexus 7. For 3 consecutive days, the Vorthax scientist had conducted increasingly desperate experiments on human armor samples, desperately searching for some weakness, some fundamental limitation that would restore her understanding of material science to something resembling sanity. Captain Rodriguez observed with infinite patience as the scientist initiated her latest test, a precisely focused antimatter beam that theoretically should have converted any known material into pure energy according to basic physics. The kind of weapon that existed only in theoretical research because nothing could possibly survive it. The steel sample glowed incandescent white for several terrifying seconds, its surface temperature reaching levels that should have vaporized any molecular structure. Then, impossibly, it returned to its original dull gray state, scarred, pitted, but fundamentally intact. "This violates every principle of physics I understand," Kelrith whispered, her 3 eyes staring at instruments that insisted on providing impossible readings. Antimatter annihilation should have converted this entire sample into electromagnetic radiation. The fact that matter still exists here defies theoretical possibility. "Doctor," Rodriguez said quietly, "may I pose a question? What constitutes the most effective personal armor currently available in galactic civilization?" "The Zephyrian quantum composite matrix," Kelrith replied automatically, her scientific training overriding her emotional distress. 15 precisely engineered layers of quantum-aligned polymers with integrated energy dispersion networks and adaptive threat response systems. Laboratory testing demonstrates 99.7% effectiveness against all known energy-based weapons. And what would happen if someone attacked that armor with a simple lead projectile fired from a chemical propellant weapon? Kelrith paused, her scientific mind working through implications she had never previously considered. "Well, theoretically, the kinetic projectile would penetrate completely. The armor matrix isn't designed to handle primitive kinetic impacts." "Because," she stopped, understanding finally beginning to dawn. "Because no civilized military has used such weapons for centuries." "Now you're beginning to comprehend our approach," Rodriguez said gently. "Your armor represents perfect optimization for expected threats. Our armor represents imperfect preparation for unexpected threats." Kelrith sat heavily, her laboratory suddenly feeling small and inadequate. "Captain, I must ask directly, what exactly are humans preparing to fight?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Doctor, we've learned that the universe always has one more surprise waiting." The final session of the first Human Galactic Diplomatic Summit convened in Station Nexus 7's Grand Conference Hall. The atmosphere had transformed dramatically from the opening ceremonies. Where initial meetings had been characterized by polite curiosity and barely concealed condescension toward the primitive-looking humans, now a complex mixture of respect, wariness, and genuine concern permeated the assembled delegates. Commander Zykthala stood before representatives from dozens of civilizations, her 4 eyes reflecting the weight of conclusions that would reshape galactic military doctrine. "After extensive testing, analysis, and consultation with our finest scientific minds, we have reached several definitive conclusions regarding human military technology and strategic philosophy." She activated the primary holographic display, showing comprehensive comparative analyses of armor systems across multiple species and technological paradigms. First, human armor is demonstrably primitive by established galactic engineering standards. It relies on brute force material solutions rather than elegant technological innovations. It is significantly heavier, bulkier, and less energy efficient than any system currently employed by galactic civilization. Several human delegates shifted slightly in their seats, but Captain Rodriguez remained perfectly motionless, her expression unreadable. Second, Zeichthala continued with growing gravity. Human armor also represents the most comprehensively protective system our combined testing protocols have ever encountered. While our specialized armor excels against specific threat categories, human armor provides reasonable protection against all conceivable threats. Admiral Koroth leaned forward, his scaled features tight with concern. "Commander, what are the broader strategic implications of these findings?" "Admiral, our computer-modeled wargames suggest that in any hypothetical conflict between human military forces and conventional galactic units, the outcome would depend heavily on weapon selection. If both sides employed standard galactic energy weapons, humans would possess a significant defensive advantage. However, if humans utilized their kinetic weapons against our energy-optimized armor systems, she allowed the implications to settle over the assembly without verbal elaboration. General Voss spoke with carefully controlled tension. "Commander, are you suggesting that humans represent a military threat to galactic stability?" Captain Rodriguez finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying absolute conviction. "General, humans pose a military threat exclusively to those who threaten them first. We have no interest in conquest, territorial expansion, or empire building. We are interested in ensuring that, regardless of what the universe presents, some humans survive to respond appropriately." The simple statement carried profound implications that resonated through the silent hall.